Bonnells Property Investors, we bring the big names and we have the big fun. Keep pushing. Pass go and collect $200 is the, if you're not watching the YouTube, you don't know. But how you going, Dan? What's happening?
How are you guys? Nice to be here and finally have a chat with everyone in the community too.
Yeah, great to meet you, man.
It's we kind of connected a couple of weeks ago, and even before that, I'd seen you commenting sort of quite regularly, and I thought this guy looks really interesting. I reckon he's got a story to tell. So I reached out and I said, look, don't reach out to everybody, but anyway. So no, tonight's going to be how you going, Joe? Before I introduce what we're talking to tonight,
mate, I'm fantastic. I'm good. I love an investor story, right? Like this is motivation for me. This is how to do it, how someone else has done it. It's one of those things where if you don't listen to what people have done and stumbled upon, you're going to make some of their mistakes. So if you can learn from their mistakes, then you can really keep going. So there's always something to learn. There's always someone to take it away from someone's story. But also you're doing this right now as well. That's the cool part. You're still going and hustling and making it happen. But no, I'm well, mate. How are you, Jeff? You cracking on?
Yeah, I thought I got a bit of the man flu. Like this weather's just all over the place. But no, going well. I'm bringing the energy, bringing the heat, and we're going to have a fantastic chat because I was reviewing your portfolio and I was just like, wow, like it's really cool what you've done and really cool to be able to unpack these kind of stories for the community, for the group. So, Dan, what are we going to with the group tonight? We're going to be talking about what it was like to sort of start off coming to Australia in the early 2000s. Because to me, we were talking about before, it's just astonishing how you're able to do that and just sort of adapt relatively quickly. And we'll talk to some of those things. And the other thing then is we're going to unpack how you built that portfolio, what it looks like, what the challenge is, because it wasn't all sort of beer and Skittles, as they say. There were some sort of obstacles where you hit the serviceability wall. So make sure, because that is something that I think is a lot of people are going to see and say, yeah, that's something I'm relating to. And we're going to, what's next? Because you are apparently a gritty landlord. So there is more to the story. You are going to keep building apparently, but yeah, we'll talk to what that looks like. So before we get into it though, I want to know, introduce, you are a migrant, as I mentioned, Brazilian, and speak sort of Portuguese, a lovely, beautiful country. Spent a bit of time there myself back in the days, only 4 weeks actually, but just a little bit of time. So you came to Australia in 2002. You said where you're a student, and then you sort of thought, yeah, hey, I like the look of this. Aussies are getting ahead, buying, and you're an Aussie as well, as a dinky guy as me, buying properties left, right, and center. Let's buy some for myself. And you are as well a husband to a very supportive wife and father of 2 boys. I think that's really cool as well. And you caught the property bug, as I said, after buying that first PPOR, and you call yourself a property enthusiast. I would call you a greedy landlord, but no, here we are. So ask the first question.
I'm excited. I reckon this is going to be good because, I just love the migrant mentality. I speak to a lot of investors all day, every day, and so many people that we deal with are migrants because they've got this like mindset of who was it? Hernandez in like the 1500s, discovering the new world. He landed on the new world and then he said, burn the boats. We're not going back. There's no going back. How do we make this happen? There was the only way through. The only way to it is through it. And it's that hustle and that grind that, you know, I love it. I think there's so much value in things for everyone to learn from that. So that's what I'm excited about hearing. And Dan, you're just a savage as well. You haven't stopped. There's a massive hurdle comes where everyone just stops. And then you're like, oh, cool. Okay. Well, how do I figure a way around this hurdle? And you just keep going and you keep going. And it's like, I like to think about, when you're doing like loan paperwork for your first property, or you're trying to save for the deposit. It's like, oh my gosh, this is the hardest thing ever. I've got to provide this. Oh, they're asking for the documents all over again. And I'm like, I just want to give up. And I'm like, oh, cool. At that point, somebody else has given up. They're now no longer competition for you. And if you keep going, you're going to be one of the few. And then you keep going. Next challenge, next challenge, next challenge. I don't know. How do you think about this whole migrant mentality? Is this a real thing? Is it something I made up in my head, or what is it?
I don't think so. It definitely works for me. I can say that. But I think coming to a new country, especially at young age, I was 22 when I got here. Just turned 45 a couple of days ago. So
Happy
pretty much
birthday.
I have been half of my life over here. And what I can say is, when you come to a new country, you pretty much leave everything behind. You have to start fresh, and the only way is up. Like that is, because if it doesn't work out, the only option is to go back to where you came from. And I was determined to succeed, and I really wanted to stay because after spending a bit of time here and studying, I realized that I would have a lot more opportunities in Australia than I would ever be able to have in Brazil from a career perspective, from work-life type of balance, family, raising kids, all that stuff. So from me, it was what I wanted to do. It was the option that I wanted to have for myself and my future family, which I didn't know back then that I would have one here. But it is what I wanted to do, and I can say it's not easy, and it hasn't been easy, especially at the beginning, because I mean, a lot of your, especially friends, you tend to have your friends from your childhood and school years, and you leave all that behind, and family as well. So it is definitely not easy, but over time you make new friends, you start a family, and you just start building from scratch. So yeah, it's definitely full of challenges, and I find it funny because quite often we see in the news that especially now with migration being quite high, there is a fairly negative sort of lens on migration, but Australia is built on migration, but especially around international students, because I think if you look at what is the average number of people per dwelling according to the census, I think it was 2.3 or whatever it was. Yeah. And I make a joke around that. If you ever lived in an international student house, that was probably the average per bedroom, because there is no spare money, I can say, on that front. So it was very challenging at the beginning, but I'm pretty sure this challenge for everyone. It was not only for me.
Yeah,
nice. Well, let's get into, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, because I want to hear some of those, sort of dive into those challenges, because they are, like, it's hard enough sort of, to Joe's point about the loan paperwork. I heard Toddy Sloan the other day talking about refinancing and filling that paperwork, and they actually said, well, you know what, we actually get to borrow, the bank is giving us sort of millions of dollars to buy these properties. Like, who the heck are we? But I want to know, the question we love asking people, Dan, is how did you, what got you passionate about sort of buying and investing? Like, how did that all start?
Everything started when we bought our first place. Yep. So as I said, we got here 2002. Yep. I got here 2002. I met my wife along the way when we were studying, but we were really living together when we got our permanent residency, and then eventually became citizens. And we got married in 2008, and we had been saving a bit of money back then. And after the wedding, we came back, and I think next step is that we should buy a house or a place to live. And then we end up doing that. We bought a townhouse in Tarahumara. For those that are not from Sydney, it's just on the upper North Shore. We bought a townhouse, which is
it's a nice way to say Parramatta. Upper North Shore.
Tarahumara.
Tarahumara, Joe, not Parramatta.
Yeah.
Oh, what an insult, Joe. You cannot,
I was like, this is not.
Mate, if you're from Sydney,
the leafy one.
It's a very, very. It's a little west, old Parramatta. No. Okay, Tarahumara. Okay,
yeah, no. Cool. So we bought we bought a townhouse in Tarahumara. We lived there for a few years, but as we bought it, and later on when we sort of decided to buy an investment property, and I'll get to that story shortly. But as the time passed, I think it was a couple of years later, 2-3 years later, I could see the value going up, and I could. So in 1 year back then, we had very low salaries back at that time. But I was in my head, like, I was making more money between us, because it's just equity growing. But I was making more money through a capital growth than actually working. So I said, there is something here. And then that's what sort of started triggering me to look into it further. start researching, start going to seminars, and the more you learn, the more options you see ahead of you. But I think what triggered was really just seeing the increase in value of the property, and that was just one. So like imagine if I have more, like how would that work out?
Yeah,
That's
it's
a bit of a light
amazing,
bulb,
especially when you think about putting in, you would put in what, $120,000 of cash total, and then now it's grown $100,000 in 2 years or 3 years. You've now doubled your money essentially. Obviously, it's not cash, but it is equity. So okay, so it was just that light bulb moment of boom. Okay, we got to do this. What were some of the valuable like contents and books or courses or things that you did along the journey that was worthwhile?
I have done them all. You name it, one of them, and I will say that I'm pretty sure I have done it. So back then, I started sort of attending lots of seminars. So back then, we had like I love real estate. Then there was I did, even though, do you remember what was his name? Rick Otten. He actually got in trouble with ACCC.
How to buy a property for $1. I
For
remember
$1,
listening
yeah.
to his podcast.
I did his seminar, which I actually thought was pretty good.
Did you buy $1 property?
Look, it's just he got in trouble because people took it literally, but who can actually buy a property for $1? Like the concept of an option, yeah, it's there. You can potentially get an option in place for $1, but no one will actually accept $1 for an option in their right mind. But reality is, you could, but it's unlikely. So I did that. I did a number of seminars, number of courses, number of books, and I think everybody probably has read Rich Dad Poor Dad, but I think that was probably one of the pivotal moments as well in terms of looking at property differently. And I just consume a lot of content. And what I was going to say, even these days, probably there is not much seminars anymore, but there is so much content available to you through YouTube and other social media. I would say that I'll probably consume easily 3 to 4 hours a week of different content around property, especially when I'm at the gym or walking the dog. Just put the AirPods on and start listening to some podcasts and other things. And just going back to that, to the beginning, Joe, when you were saying, it's really, I actually find really helpful to hear other people's stories. It doesn't matter how big or small the portfolio is of somebody, because everyone has a different experience with property, and there are so many ways of making money with real estate that I, for example, have never done any meaningful renovation. I have done probably a couple of cosmetic stuff, but nothing major. So just to hear somebody else's stories around a renovation or a subdivision or something else they have done, it just gets you to get a little nugget of gold nugget of piece of information that you can just use later on. Because as you said before, you do get stuck with some different problems, and you're going to have to find solutions. And I think the more that you absorb, the better it is for you to make those decisions and find solutions for problems later on.
So how did the portfolio kick off? So what did that kind of look like portfolio wise? Like how you got educated, and then then it was one property, and then boom, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and going like that? Or what did the first one look like? Was it the best option, do you think, at the time? What are your thoughts?
I think it started as a little bit like, just going back, my first investment property, it started because a friend was looking to build something in the Central Coast, and I ended up going with him to have a look at the block of land and the builders and so on. And that sparked, if you can build one and look at the cost back then, I can probably do one as well. And I ended up deciding to build that a house as an investment without really knowing much. But I think what triggered the learning journey was actually getting into investment, that first investment property, because you will start to look for reassurance, I guess, once you make a decision. I should have done a lot of this research beforehand, but I think it kind of helped. It happened in parallel. So, but it worked out pretty well, and it's actually probably one of the properties that has probably increased most in value, probably because it's the oldest one as well. But
I think it's done. I looked at your numbers. According to your numbers, it's done 16% on average, sort of year on
Compounded.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just like, and you bought that in 2012 from memory.
Yeah.
I think it was.
I can put this slide up, so I can probably talk about the portfolio and individuals. So let me just share my screen. Just give me one second.
Because and while you're sort of getting it up, I know it's. Did you? I think I know the answers. It kind of just sounds like you're a Joe. You just kind of get out there and get at it and make it happen. Did you have that vision in your head that you were going to create a substantial sort of 8-figure portfolio, or did you just say, "I'm going to buy properties and see where it goes"? What was your mindset?
My original mindset was, if my PPOR can increase value, if I buy another one, then if that one increases value, just it will help me to pay this one off sooner. I think that was the original thought. But then as you start investing, then you start adjusting the goals, because I think with goals, I don't think there is ever like an end game. Like, you set up a goal, you go and try to achieve, and then you achieve that goal, and then you put another peg in the sand, you set up another goal, and then from there you go. And that's pretty much what has happened. So sort of have set up multiple goals along the years, but I definitely have some goals now, and when I achieve them, I'll probably just revise and set up some new goals.
Well, yeah, and you're not scared of interest rates either, right? These are all at
I'll tell the story of each property, but as you can see now, most of them are cash flow negative because of the high interest rates. So you can see here, from a interest rate perspective, I'm paying anywhere in the mid 6s for all these investment properties. In the middle of COVID, I was actually just having a look before we started catch up. During COVID, when the interest rates were probably between 2s and 3s, I was getting actually, I was having a 66,000 cash, portfolio of 66,000 cash flow positive.
When interest rates were as low at their lowest, is that what?
Yeah. So when they were in the 2s and 3s, and as they increase, then you can see that most of them are negative because of the difference between the yield and the interest rates. But then that actually triggered me to start focusing around high yield properties, which is the latest one, which was done last year. So you can see that my strategy has changed, and I'm sort of going towards that way from now. But I'll get there.
To unpack, so if I look at the income and expenses, or the interest on your first property in Wyong, so in 2012, because I think what's happened, and this is what a lot of people, and for those sort of starting, or just you've probably taken equity out to sort of keep buying the second and the third and maybe the fourth. Is that because I see if your cash flow is negative nearly 10,000? So is that essentially because you have used the equity from that property to keep buying others? Is that, and to leapfrog and snowball? Is that what you've done?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So you refinance, and then you take the equity and move on.
Is it negative after depreciation? Oh, yeah, it would be.
No, the depreciation is here, but I'm not factoring depreciation as part of that cash flow.
Okay. So that brings it back a good amount, because that means you're only negative $3,000, and on the second one you're positive. And
because some properties are in our name, some properties are on trusts, and that will probably play around the depreciation as well, because if it's on the trust, then you can't really offset that against your income, as you know. But it really depends on the structure behind the property. But so maybe just before I started sort of probably unpacking each one of the properties, is there any questions, or probably anything that you probably want to know from a high level perspective?
No, man, let's just hit it. This looks really good. So in 2012, you bought Wyong. We kind of talked to that. That is now worth $1.2 million. And you bought it for $476,000.
I didn't buy it, I built it, because I bought a block of land for $230,000, and then the construction cost me another $235,000, and altogether it cost about $476,000. So I bought. So
was that a house and land package that you did? Like you met up with somebody and they kind of put it all together, and they packaged it and bundled it so that it was all good?
No, it
No.
was just like I bought the land, and then I chose the builder, and then sort of did 2 separate contracts, and pretty much took it from there.
I know, Joe. I know, Joe. You get on your soapbox about house and lands, but if I'm going to do a house and land, that's probably the way. Like I would want to sort of then you control.
Definitely.
You basically buy the land, and then you sort of are able to control what you build as well, rather than just kind of that turnkey. So to me, that's not necessarily turnkey. You're actually having some ability to create the value there at least, rather than just paying the commissions to who are the person selling that a house and land is. Controversial, maybe.
Yeah. So what's that? $724,000 worth of equity uplift.
Triple,
but
basically.
I'm probably being generous with the 1.2 million valuation, because there was a recent sale in the community that was around 1.15, but a couple of years ago during COVID, there was a couple of houses that sold for 1.2, 1.25. So I think Central Coast is just sort of going through a recovery. So we're not far off of getting 1.2 again.
So what are your key learnings from Wyong? What are some of the things that you kind of took away from that and you said, shit, I should have really done that better and worked towards that?
I put some notes here on the bottom, sort of to highlight some of my learnings from each one of the properties. So one thing that I didn't know, and probably a lot of people don't know, is when you buy a block of land, one of the key things is to check if that land is already registered or not. Because if it's not registered, most likely going to have to wait for registration, and that could be a process that could take anywhere between 2-3 months all the way to a year, depending on how the developer is actually looking to release that parcel of land. So I didn't know about that. I learned that when I bought that property, because we bought in 2011, but we couldn't really start building until 2012, and pretty much took the whole year building.
How did you go with the finance sort of piece on that? Because that's where some people get tripped up, from my experience, from what I sort of saw. Because particularly if your circumstances changes, if your circumstances doesn't, how did you go with finance on that one?
It was fine, because back then it was our first investment property. So from a serviceability perspective, we didn't have any sort of concerns around, and we didn't have any kids back then too. So it wasn't really an issue in terms of serviceability and not having one of my wife, for example, in maternity leave, that type of stuff. But back then it was okay. It became an issue later on as the portfolio grew and I started having kids, and that was something that, especially when I'm building the rooming house last year, I bought a block of land, and then the interest rate started to increase. And then by the time I got to build, my pre-approval meant nothing. So I had to find ways of financing that construct, but I'll get there in a second.
That's juicy. But all right. So the second unit. Oh, sorry, they're more landscape included community title.
Just some comments. So this house actually is part of it's a community title, which means it's part of a community that has it's not a strata charge, but it's a community charge. So there is shared swimming pools, there is shared facilities around tennis courts, and a whole bunch of other swimming pool, gym, all that type of stuff. So there is a bit of money that goes towards that, but it's a really nice complex, and you can make it up the difference, the costs on the higher end, because of all the facilities that the estate actually provides. So it's over the years proved to be a solid investment from a capital growth perspective. It has always, from a cash flow, has probably always sit around neutral. Now it's a bit negative, but it always did its job in the portfolio, which was to give equity for further purchases.
Yeah. Okay. So then you led into an off the plan unit. So that's 3 years later. So how did that all come about? What did that look like? So
then we had our first son was born in 2014, and what's missing here is the PPOR. We actually built the house that we live in. We built in 2014. No, we bought it 2014 and probably got ready somewhere in 2015. The unit we bought in 2015 was off the plan because Inda was my wife. Inda was on maternity leave, and I wanted to continue to buy. Back then, I thought that Brisbane was gonna go boom. I was a few years too early, but but I wanted to get into the market, and I bought off the plan because we couldn't, whilst she was not working, we couldn't actually buy. So I bought, the intent was to buy off the plan. So by the time was gonna get the place was going to be finished, she would be back to work, and then we could actually get the finance sorted. So that was the plan there. But before that unit, we actually built the place that we live in today, which is our PPOR, but was the second PPOR on the.
I love that you've opened up the kimono to large extent. You're vulnerable about the off the plan. Like we all unfortunately sort of smash the off the plan because it sort of
I
says,
don't know about unfortunately. It says first 5 years no growth. It's just
that was a lot of Brisbane though. But at the same time, I mean, you probably paid a little bit overs. I mean, I remember my sort of that townhouse didn't see much anyway, and then it's sort of absolutely. You've probably seen, so that's grown. Let's see, what's that? 265,000. That probably saw most of that in the last 2 to 3 years, probably because you just couldn't build. You couldn't build them for 400,000 at that stage.
No, and the reason why I put it here is like it's probably the property that maybe like looking back in hindsight, would I have bought that property again? Probably not. But sometimes it is what's available to you, and you don't have enough knowledge, and it's just taking. I took an action, and overall,
well, I mean, that action has still gained you $265,000, right?
Correct. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So
action takes imperfect action is better than perfect.
Inaction.
Not better than perfect. Perfect inaction. That's right. Yeah.
So the learnings from that is that probably until 2020, it had hardly moved from an equity perspective. From cash flow was okay, and then with COVID also the rents went crazy in Brisbane, like everybody knows. But one of the good things is that I bought directly from the developer, so I actually got 25 out of. I paid 435, but I got a 25,000 sort of cash back, which is effectively I paid 410 for the unit.
Yeah, and that's negative $3,000, so that's a good number of years of free cash flow, right? But maybe don't think about discounts like that when they.
Well, you know what I think about discount. I think they're giving you that discount because they can't sell them. That's why they're giving it to you. They're happy to sort of
changing the purchase
because it'll still probably say on the contract. It still probably said 435, did it? Or
and for the people that probably new to property investing is that when you buy a brand new unit off the plan and you're buying from either real estate agent or you're buying from a very nice glossy brochure, you are paying that 25,000 discount that I got is actually what the commission is for that person selling that off the plan property.
They just want it off their books.
That's why everybody says stay away from an off the plan unit. But look, they say that if you overpaid for a property, it's like a bad haircut. Time will fix it. So it's one of those scenarios where you just have to wait a little bit, and eventually the capital growth end up happening in Brisbane, and now it's okay.
Just like a bad haircut that keeps on happening.
Yeah. Unfortunately for me, it doesn't. But
you sued it, mate. I would not sue. Yeah, that's all right. I love that you actually shared that though, because some people would sort of try and hide that away in the closet. But I think you've still seen it's probably taken equity from that as well, I imagine, because otherwise it would probably be cash flow positive if you're paying down debt on it. Would that be taking equity?
Yeah. So I think, look, I'm not hiding anything in that, because I think even your mistakes, you end up learning. So as you're probably going to see later on the other slide, which is the self-managed super fund properties, I don't have anything against strata properties, but I prefer villas and townhouses over units just because of the sort of the supply angle, because it's you don't know what's going to happen with zoning in that specific suburb or that street or wherever you're buying the property. But if zoning changes and then suddenly there is a block of units with, 200 new units going next door, your 2-bedroom unit suddenly is not a rare asset anymore, because there is so many of them in there. So it's going to damage the growth and potentially the rental yield out of the property. But with villas and townhouses, there is only so many you can build because of the physical space. You can't build them up. So I bought this property, I sort of started looking everything for different lens, and I haven't bought another unit again, but I still buy strata properties, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. And then is that what led you into this duplex one? And by the way, anyone that's on Facebook or YouTube or wherever else this is going, throw any questions in. Rarely are you going to see someone that opens up a portfolio. So what's the total value of the portfolio?
Just under 10 million, roughly.
So
I mean,
yeah. So across both, so I have 11 properties in total. One is our PPOR.
Okay. Oh, so this isn't even all of them.
No.
There's the SMSF. Yeah, stay tuned because there is an SMSF coming up. That's the plot twist. That's how we sort of start to unpack the borrowing capacity.
Oh, cool. Okay, so that's so 11 properties in total. Sorry, 11 million. Jesus Christ.
11. Altogether is probably about 9.2.
Right.
But so a bit shy of the 8 digits, but it was a nice stretch, Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah.
Depends on which valuation, because that's only about a variance of 10%. So if you that's the thing that I'd like to sort of mention to people. If you are struggling with valuation, get your broker, if they're not already, to go to a different lender and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Broker, go and check it Macquarie, go and check it ANZ to see what they come back with valuation, because I've seen ones that have come back on a 600K property, the purchase price, they've come back at sort of 750, sort of 800, whereas other valuations have come back at 550. And you're like, why have they done that? It's all in the algorithm, but just that's the point around. So your portfolio could be 10 million, depending on who's valuing it.
Could, if I get my broker to get you, Jeff, to value, then probably, I'll have a chat.
Like you, mate. You know how to do it. Just keep asking the question. They'll eventually come back with the number. But no, so Bonnells Bay, which is again on the Central Coast, I believe.
Yeah, Lake Macquarie, in between Central Coast and Newcastle. So I started a trend with the house in Wyong, then we built our house. So I bought so I was going around new properties because I thought that I had sort of figured out a way of making instant equity, and by instant actually building something and getting that valued at a higher amount of money than I actually was spending to go through it. That's a way of creating my manufacturing equity of like people like to say. It's just it is a process, and I enjoy the process of building. I don't think it's for everyone, because there is, of course, a lot of risk involved in building with finances and everything else, and with the builder itself. But it's a process that I enjoy, and I think it's something that I will continue to do if there is an opportunity to do that. Probably just not now, because the environment now I think is not favorable to build anything. But I will eventually get back to it if I can.
Could I just take a step back? Because building is not something I've heard anybody particularly enjoys. Like, I've done it once or twice, or a couple of times, and I thought it was it's like sort of stabbing, like putting forks in your eye. It is painful. So what is it you enjoy about that process, and how do you sort of how have you made it more seamless for yourself?
It's never seamless, but I think, look, I'm in my day job, what I like to say, I'm a product manager, and I deal with projects pretty much day in, day out. So as part of my day-to-day, I involved in some sort of project, launching a new product or launch a new feature, whatever that is. And I have never seen a project actually go according to plan. So to me, building is just an extension of that day-to-day activity where you have a plan, but you know that you're going to have contingencies. You're going to have sort of ways around it, because you are focusing on the end game. And to get to the end game, you're going to have to go and overcome some obstacles, which to me is fine. And there is a sense of satisfaction, I think, when you complete a build. And I think it's a different sort of way of transacting a property, I guess.
Do you see? I wanted to ask that too. Do you see opportunity though, where others are like, where others see problems, you see opportunity? Is that kind of the way you think about it?
pretty much. Like I can give an example. When we built our house, the one that we live in, I remember back then, like as you can, it's not here, but like we spent about 860,000, I think, altogether. That was 10 years ago. But I could see that the values were increasing, and a brand new house at that time was probably worth close to $1 million. So I knew that if I build a house and go through the process, there was about $100 and something thousand of equity to be manufactured in the process. As long as you don't overspend your budget on going nuts on the features for the house, but there was money to be made. And I think if you look at a construction with those lenses, you can manufacture value, but it's quite easy to get lost and overcapitalized. But you just have to be very conscious of your budget, and I think that's one of the key things when building.
So what's that? What are some of the tips for people that are so that they don't go over their budgets? Just don't get the get the 3 mil thick bench top rather than the 6 mil granite kind of thing.
Yeah, like have a look at the different builds, but also it's very different to build for yourself than it is to build an investment property. Because if you're building for yourself, you're probably going to go the extra mile and put all the nice finishes and everything else. But if you're building as an investment property, then just try to match what the features and everything sort of is for the area. There is no need to go over the top if it's not going to bring the additional rental yield or the value to the property. So just be mindful of what the area expects from a property in terms of like air conditioning, what type of flooring, and so on, the bench tops and so on. So just do your research, and I think that's probably one of the key things.
The way you're
it's kind of come up is, how did you get to the mindset? How did you get this kind of mindset, or how do you think about mindset for this? Because this is what you're talking about. Just go, wait for the next one. I'm ready to go now.
I did hear a dog there in the background. And
the dog wanted to get off in.
Whilst you're talking about, it kind of reminds me what you're talking about there about the opportunity. It's like the Steve McKnight. It's like you buy the problem and not that you solve, but you kind of sell the solution. So that's what I love. But to the mindset, like, how do you think? How did you get to that?
There is a really good quote, and I'm probably gonna butcher it because I can't remember the word by word. I think it was by Einstein. He said that there is no problem without a solution. You just haven't really thought long enough or hard enough about that problem. And I think that's so true, because a lot of people, and probably including myself, like you can get quite emotional and overcome by an issue that you may think is the end of the world, but until you start digging and start exploring all the options, it might not be a big deal, and you might end up finding something else that is actually a better way of doing something that you didn't even know was possible. So I really like that angle that, I mean, we're going to face challenges every single day. And I think building a portfolio like everyone in this community is doing or trying to do, there is so many challenges. It's not short of challenge, but you just have to be creative. You have to find solutions. You have to talk to people. You have to have a look at what everyone is doing, and you will find a way of move forward. And I think that's probably goes back to the migrant mentality, because there is just one way, and then I'm not going back. And I think that's probably
burn the boats.
I think if you do go back, you'll go back a lot wealthier. That's for sure.
There's so much to unpack in what you just said there. Like, you talked about sort of finding a way. Like, there's no problem without a solution. I think that's just amazing. What you also kind of alluded to is like talking to people and having those conversations. And one of the things I was thinking about in the lead up to this is I wanted to say is, well, which members of the team have been most critical for you in your journey?
Well, that's it, because you came with nothing, right? Like you had to build that team over time.
Yeah, I think the key building the team is definitely something that I think everybody, a lot of people has commented that, and I think one of the key, most important people in your team is going to be your broker, and you need to make sure that you have a good broker. So a big shout out to Barry. Thanks, Barry, for all the support over the years.
Barry.
Yeah.
Go Bazza.
So
Except you're not going to share his name and business name because you don't want him to be
You'll
flooded.
get a lot
so he
busier.
becomes a lot less.
he knows who he is, but just a big shout out to Barry.
Go, sorry, mate.
That's what I was gonna say. So I think broker is probably will be your number one type of
Definitely.
sort of key people in your team. But you're gonna need. I use buyers agents pretty much. I started using halfway along the journey, and I pretty much use all the time. It's just that I don't think I have enough time to do all the research that's necessary. And I do like the idea of bouncing back ideas with a person that's on the ground buying properties all the time. So I get a lot of value from just the conversations that I have with the buyers agents that I deal with. That I think it's worthwhile relationship as well.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my things. How have you seen the portfolio shift from not using a buyer's agent and then using one? How is it kind of, have they shaped it a little bit and molded it differently?
I think the key thing, what I noticed with using a buyer's agent is probably velocity to actually transact the deal. When I'm doing myself, it's a little bit of analysis paralysis. You know, like you start you're looking everywhere, but you're not really focused on getting an outcome. Everything is an opportunity. And I think every time that I engage a buyer's agent, I think within a couple of weeks, 3 weeks tops, we've got a deal landed. So I think I tend to be more focused on looking at whatever has been shortlisted for me, make sure that ticks all my boxes from all the stuff that I have listed as my criteria for investing. And if it does, if it hits all the boxes and the numbers are looking good, make an offer. And if they accept, let's proceed. Yeah. So velocity is definitely one of the key things that I noticed but just the research that you have access to when using buyer's agents and the knowledge of dealing and negotiating, I think I take a lot of value from that as well.
Were they all off-market deals? Were they on-market deals that they brought to you?
A mix of them. So, for example, with the Bonnells Bay was a block of land that was actually on market, but the buyer's agent was quite diligent and actually. I think he went the extra mile on that deal, because I remember he found a block of land that was on a street that actually already had 2 other duplexes, and he could see from the council applications for those duplexes that there was a precedent for the council to accept duplexes. There was the size and the frontage of the lot everything was sort of within line of those 2. So he said, there is a really good precedent here. So I don't believe the council will knock that back. So, and I think that's what you want on your team, is somebody that can be quite diligent and actually do those checks for you, because I didn't know a lot of those things when I wanted to build a duplex. So the buyer agent actually added a lot of value in that process as well.
There you go. That's it's interesting. It's just about I totally relate, and for me, that person's probably my accountant, or our accountant, but somebody who has got a lot of experience.
Sorry. I have the impression that we have the same accountant.
Maybe. He's probably going to be accountant for half of Australia, way he's going. But no, I think that like just having those conversations and sort of spitballing and bouncing ideas is super valuable, because if you don't do that, you wouldn't have come up with the idea to probably do that. Maybe that rooming house, for example. But should we get back into the portfolio?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things. That's one of the questions I had, is like, as you started seeing success, as things started to really roll on, like, how did you balance like a fun, comfortable life and building and scaling a massive portfolio? Like, how did you kind of balance? Because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There is sacrifice, or is there none? I don't know. What's that story look like?
Ask my wife. She complains all the time that we're not having enough holidays. But
I think you can take some holidays now.
It is definitely a balance. But I think we are both probably, we both have the same sort of mindset when it comes to money. I wouldn't say that we are frugal, but we always live like a bit below our means, in the sense that we both have really good incomes. I would say, sort of compared to the sort of the average sort of population out there. But we never really spend more than we actually make. And I think we always have this thing about sort of making sure we're saving, make sure that we're sort of finances are in order. And that has always helped with the serviceability and being able to afford the properties as we sort of build the portfolio. And as we start sort of grow in our careers, having a high income definitely helps when trying to afford another place. But if it wasn't for tier 2 and tier 3 lenders, I probably wouldn't be where I am now.
But, before we go, I want to. When did you start transitioning to, like? So you had your tier 1s, which is your CBAs, your big 4 banks, basically. When did you start to look at your tier 2 lenders, such as your St. George's, your first make, they're a third tier. But yeah, when did you start looking at those different lenders? Was it about sort of 3 or 4, or yeah?
Yeah, I think because I did a lot of build constructions, I always found that the tier 1 banks were not very favorable with serviceability on those type of deals. So at the moment that I started building a lot of properties, then I quite soon had to go to the First Max and the Granites of the world. So I have a lot of them in sort of in my as my lenders. But I think yeah, so I had to go there when I wanted to build the properties. But to be honest, I don't find them any different. So I do all my banking with one of the main banks. But
all of your banking.
No. I do my personal banking with one of the main banks. But then I have each property probably has a different lender behind it. So and I can't tell the difference between a tier 1, tier 2 from a loan perspective. So it makes no difference to me, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just money. It's money that's come to you to buy that property.
Correct. Yeah.
So many questions. Like, I'm loving that. There's some really sophisticated and just smart questions coming through. Which ones do we ask? Because there's just so many properties in your portfolio as well. It's just this could end up going.
Well, yeah, I think wherever it is, the Bay.
Bonnells Bay.
Bonnells Bay. I'm interested about this house and granny flat one. So what's the go with this one? Because did it have a granny flat initially? You purchased it for $1 million. You bought it for $1 million.
No, I bought for $770. But then I'm including there the costs of constructing the granny flat. So between the approvals and everything else, it was close to $1 million to get the granny flat plus the house on the top. I purchased the house for $770 in 2018. As you can see from the picture, there is 2 levels. And at some stage, that house was built in the 1940s. And at some stage, there was 2 units. There was a unit downstairs and a unit upstairs. And when I bought it, I was hopeful that I could convert that into 2 dwellings and then rent the 2 separate. So my view here, instead of building a duplex, I thought that I could go with a renovation and convert that into 2 units. I spent a fair bit of time in 2018 and 19 trying to work with a town planner in Newcastle to make that happen, but it didn't. But luckily, when I purchased, I always had a plan B. If things don't work out, worst case scenario, I can put a granny flat at the back and increase the yield, and that would be my plan B. And that's what happened.
Dropped the value, because that seems like a very big, nice kind of Mayfield's a nice little pocket. Like, has it added value, or has it detracted from the main house, or did you think about that side of things from a value equity increase?
I remember having that conversation with a couple of agents before I decided to go ahead with the granny flat. And from one angle, you can look at less people will probably going to be like from the first, not so much first home, but like if you look at a family looking for a house, if I was to sell, you're probably going to find people, I don't want a granny flat. So you have probably a smaller pool of people that probably going to be interested in that property. But in the same way, if you're selling to an investor, then that granny flat could mean a higher yield, then maybe there is a value to the investor. And it could mean that somebody buying a house spend a little bit more and then can actually rent the granny flat and help to pay the mortgage, there's probably different lenses. And I decided to go because I wanted to increase the yield, because my plan A didn't work out and I had to do something for the property. And I just didn't want to go back and put it back in the market to sell, because I thought that there was value in doing the granny flat.
Yeah. Okay. That makes perfect sense.
And unfortunately, it is, from a cash flow perspective, it is not working out for me at this current scenario because of the high interest rates. And I'm gonna go through that later on in a second. So when I have my next steps, I think there is an element. If I'm gonna recalibrate my portfolio and gear toward cash flow positive properties, like I have the rooming house, I would probably looking to potentially get rid of the Mayfield and the Duplex, and replace with type of properties like the rooming house or some other higher yield properties. And that's something that I'm looking to do. But I'm just gonna sit on my hands for a little bit longer and see if the market changes before I have to get there.
Okay, yeah, because those two are the big cash eaters out of the portfolio, aren't they? Clearly.
The reason why the Duplex it's quite significantly negatively geared is because it is under the trust. And in New South Wales, I didn't know that back then, but now I know. So in New South Wales, for those that don't know, if you have a property investment under a trust, your threshold for land tax, it is pretty much non-existent. So we pay from
20,000 or something. It's just really super low.
So not financial advice, obviously.
Yeah. So when considering a purchase in New South Wales, I would personally try to maximize land tax thresholds on the personal names before going to a trust. But it is what it is.
I certainly hope you didn't. Hope you weren't using the accountant if we're using the same one, because I'm sure he would have been all over that. I would hope he is. But interesting as well, because you wouldn't have been able to claim, like in a trust, you can't claim the negative gearing side of things, I imagine, as well.
Correct. So that's why that's a property that's a candidate to be sold, because I have accumulated losses in the last few years in there because of depreciation and the negative cash flow. So if I sell that from a capital gains perspective, I probably wouldn't have a really big tax bill to pay, because it has been sort of accumulating losses there.
There's that kind of frozen equity that Joe talks about. It's like that you've got $600,000 or over $600,000 sitting there, which I'm like, wow, I'm getting excited. You can I don't know how many building rooming houses you can build, but yeah, it looks like you could really start to accelerate that cash flow, which is what we were talking about.
So is this also so far? It's none of the SMSF stuff. We're just talking about personal name and then trust and then trust.
This is the properties outside of super, correct?
Yeah. So that's awesome. Okay, cool. Well, let's chat through this rooming house. One of the other questions, a question that just came up was, is the overall position of the portfolio positive or negative? We might be jumping the gun there, but I mean, go on. Sorry.
No, as I said earlier, during COVID, it was positively geared because of the interest rates. Now I'm currently you can see 5 properties, but the Bonnells Bay there is 2 titles because there's 2 units in there. So these 6 properties are currently $44,000 negatively geared, and the 2 big contributors for that are those 3 properties here: the Duplex plus the house and the granny flat. So that's what I'm saying.
Are they growing still? There's still growth. There's still growth happening, and it's still moving, and you're still comfortable at that.
So I believe that there is more growth to come. Like, they're both in really well, sort of good areas, and I think Newcastle still have legs to grow, because I think from the I really like Newcastle, and I actually I talk to my wife all the time. I wouldn't mind moving there at some stage, but she doesn't.
Well, going is the way, mate. Don't worry about this Newcastle. I mean, they've got both are beautiful.
But I do think that there is growth on it, and if you look at the property clock, I think both Central Coast, Newcastle, Lake Macquarie, they are in that sort of recovery mode, and I think at some stage we're gonna get some growth off there. So I'm willing to probably just wait a little bit and see what happens.
So we've now started building this portfolio, and things have started to get negative. And what is what is it? Rather than me tell the story, what's the kind of mindset you've gone heavy duty cash flow with a rooming house? How did that come about?
Well, I got stuck with serviceability because of those two purchases. And then when it come during COVID, I started looking into how can I improve serviceability? How can I improve cash flow positive? And that has kind of changed my way of thinking about the portfolio. So I decided my next deal would be something that would have to give me a really good cash flow position. I started researching a lot of different things, and I ended up landing at a rooming house. So I think that sort of ticks all the boxes for me. So let's go and build one. So I ended up purchasing yep. So I bought a block of land in Darra and commissioned a builder that basically just does rooming houses. And I have 5 self-contained units inside the house. 4 of them are currently renting for $385, and one of them has a little sort of patio, and it rents for an extra $10, so $395.
The cool thing I love about Darra, that's where they had the boy who swallowed the universe. That's
I
where
know.
that was based. Yeah.
I watched after I built it, like I was watching that, like, oh, it's in Darra. So yeah, it's a little
on the southwest kind of way.
Yeah.
On the way to Ipswich.
It's on the way to Ipswich.
The question I have for this one is, did you use all equity for this deal? Was it okay? So how cool is that? That your entire portfolio that's been growing, that you've been building over time, you've just said, no, I don't. I'm not adding 150, 200, 300, $500,000 of cash. You're ripping all the equity out to then pump it into this.
It wasn't by choice, but out of it cost me about just shy of $1 million to build. It was just 986. I got stuck because of interest rates went up and my pre-approval expired and I couldn't get that renewed. So I had to go and extract equity from a lot of other places to be able to finish the construction. So I still have a loan on it, but to be honest, the loan is pretty negligible in comparison with the value of the property. So I have a fair bit of equity stuck on that property. And I'm currently looking at ways of getting extracted. So I'm just working through that with the.
So how much equity was required to build that thing?
I end up out of the 986, I end up having I was only able to finance about 350. So I had to actually get equity from the other places to be able to finish the whole build. So there was a significant amount of equity that I had to pull 600 and something from the other places to be able to get it completed.
That's so cool, because this is one of the things people look at this portfolio and they're like, oh, cool, I want that one. I want the Darra one. I want the what is it, $12,000 cash flow. And they don't see that you've had to go through this portfolio. You've had to build up the capital growth to be able to get here. Because without the capital growth, you can't transition into cash flow, because you're getting $100 extra a week. Great. But the portfolio is not growing. So you have to focus on growth at the beginning so that you can then transition that cash, that equity, that value into something that's going to give you that cash flow asset.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and that's how you kind of thought about it.
Yeah, no, and that's what I was telling. And one of the notes that I had on the bottom there is that I think the environment from an economic perspective now, because of interest rates, and a lot of the builders actually sort of get into trouble. And I think I wouldn't build one right now. I really love that deal. I think it does what I wanted to do, and it's pretty much ticked all the boxes that I was hoping they would tick before I constructed. But I think the environment to actually build anything at the moment is so against whoever wants to do it that I think we need to wait a little bit for the economic conditions to actually improve, especially from an interest rate perspective, because the lending is so hard on construction at the moment.
I remember trying to, like, as soon as COVID, because I even just around COVID happened, that's when construction finance started to get really challenging. And then as a result, what happened is you started to see all these builders go bankrupt. And that's probably what caused, I mean, not necessarily, but I suspect it's what caused it, because if you can't get finance, you can't, and then a builder's stuck. So just, I don't know how that sort of plays out, because how do you sort of get back to, if the banks doesn't have the appetite? But go on, you got a question about the building house, the area, Joe. Want to throw that in there?
Well, this is it. How do you choose the area or suburb ideal for the rooming strategy? How do you think about that for this?
Do you have a consultant?
I actually used one of the companies in that does that in Brisbane. So I went through one of the guys that actually built a lot of them over there, and so they give a lot of options. So they work with a builder, or actually with a couple of builders, in a number of areas, and sort of they help you to put the business case together. And I had a look at a couple of options, and I end up choosing Darra because I want a big block of land, and a lot of the rooming houses, they actually build them on a small block of lands. This block is actually a 600 square meters. It's not massive, but I think in comparison to a lot of the other ones that I was seeing, like between 300-400 square meters, you have to go 2 levels, and I wanted to have like a single level construction on a big block.
Yeah. And so how has it actually been managing that? Like, one of my concerns is, oh my gosh, I've got 25 people working all together, living together. I mean, I know it doesn't feel like 25, but if you've lived in a share house, it feels like 25.
No, it's only 5. So there's 5 self-contained sort of mini apartments inside it, and there can only be 1 person per room. So from a tenancy perspective, you can only have 5 tenants in the property. But
managing it though, what's that like?
There are property managers that actually specialize in rooming houses, and I picked one of them. I actually had a chat with Phil, but the ones that I use, they manage a number of rooming houses, and to be honest, I haven't had an issue with the way that sort of they run. They charge a little bit more. I'm paying 8% management rate plus 8%, which I don't think it's crazy.
That's not crazy at all. I've heard of 20%. I've heard people charging 20%.
20%.
Some of them charge 12, but these guys charge 8. There are some additional couple of other fees in there, but I think in the scheme of things, it's okay. It's not like crazy.
I wanted to, I know this is a very niche question, but you said, so they have to be single. So what if is it kind of like if you get a partner, you have to move out? Like, is that the process, or how do you even? Hey, there you go.
I don't know how it works on the details, but I think when they sign the lease, it's just basically you cannot have another person living in there, and even if you look at the way that the properties are advertised when it's up for rent, it has like a disclaimer, and then I think the contract also mentions that the sort of they can't have another person.
There you go.
Yeah, because the tenancy laws in Queensland just allows to have 5 tenants in common and within one property, but that's how.
So one thing I notice here is there's a hidden sewer line. So how come that wasn't picked up initially? Like what?
It was not on the plan. So builders start building the house. What is this? Like there's a massive manhole in the middle of the block, and if you look at the picture, you can see that the original design and. If you can see this part of the house here, and that yellow bit is where I think the manhole is. So this part was meant to be all the way to the front where this facade is. So I had to change the design, and so it delayed me like 3-4 months because of that. But it cost me an extra, I don't know, 30 grand. But again, it's just the process of building stuff and overcoming the challenge. But it wasn't on the plan. So like you get the plan for the diagram from the block of land. You can see that there is something running, but there is no manhole on the plan. And then the builders start digging, and there is a manhole, and then you can't build over a manhole.
No, you can't. This is interesting. Building contents insurance will be high. Is that a bit higher for the rooming house?
I actually have to go through a insurance broker.
Yeah. And
I think it cost me, top of my head, is $2,700 a year, both building and landlord insurance combined, which I don't think it's excessive.
Yeah. No,
because I'm paying about 2,000 and something just for building on the other house. So I think in the scheme of things, it's just slightly higher because you have 5 tenants and maybe the landlord insurance is a little bit higher, but I don't think it's massive.
Yeah, nice. Well, I am cautious of time, and I do want to cover off the rest of the portfolio and kind of dive into the next page of what is showing on here. So
sneak peek.
Let's do that. Before
we're just getting started. We'll get back.
The amazing thing with commercial property investing is that in most cases, it's cash flow positive from day one, which means that you can drive those profits towards paying down the debt. There are instances with commercial property investing where you can actually have the property pay itself off over 10 years, which is absolutely crazy. With commercial property, you get massive net yields, so you can expect anywhere between 6 to 10%. And as we've seen in the current boom, these properties not only provide large cash flow, they do certainly grow wildly in value too. Now, with big rewards comes some risk, and this is why you should de-risk your investment as much as possible. And the way you do that is with expert due diligence. And this is why we highly recommend people hire professionals to help you along in your investing journey. Steve Polisi of Polisi Property is one such expert. Being a chartered mechanical and structural engineer in a past life, Steve draws on his analytical and mathematical skills to do that expert due diligence for you. With 6 years experience in the space, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He's the guy you want in your corner, crunching the numbers and finding the best properties in the best locations, along with ensuring that you avoid the mistakes. Steve has actually even written the book on commercial property investing in Australia, and not only is it a bestseller, I believe it to be the most comprehensive in commercial property investing on the market today. He's been generous enough to give us a massive discount for our audience of 50%. So use the code OZPROP, click the link below, get a copy today, and start learning and getting on your commercial property investing journey. There we go.
He does that actually free these days. And the interesting thing that, so although you have sort of diversified somewhat into rooming house, all that sort of thing, we asked you about what are your thoughts on commercial before we had this chat. And you said, well, no, this is in my, like, I'm focusing on optimizing what I want to do. I don't need to focus on until I actually need to do it. So on that note, let's talk SMSF.
Sorry. Yeah. Just on that key point there, Jeff, I feel like I understand residential quite well. And I feel commercial is a little bit foreign to me. It's like me trying to, which I did try, to invest in crypto or stocks in the share market. It's just completely foreign to me. And I feel like I'm gambling because I don't know enough. So I'd rather stick to my lane where I know that how to sort of analyze a deal and invest. And until I feel that residential can't really give me what I needed, then I'll probably start looking to something else. But I think residential still provides me with a whole bunch of things. And as you can see here, like I can probably get rental yields similar to what I'll probably get on a commercial property if I'm sort of buying different types of assets, which sort of it has been my investment strategy on the self-managed super fund. So.
Yeah, let's jump into it. Okay, so what? Hang on, before actually we jump into that, what happened? So we just bought that portfolio that we all just saw. Now you're going into self-managed super fund. So what made that decision? Was it you that made the decision? Were you forced into that decision?
No, I wasn't forced. So it got to a point that it was getting harder and harder to do anything outside of super. Hitting serviceability, as you know, like it becomes quite hard to actually move and acquire another property. And I still felt that I wanted to continue to invest. And I decided that I could look into self-managed super fund and see what are the options available to me in there. So I started looking into that and decided to dive in. But originally what I wanted to do with self-managed super fund was actually to continue to develop. As you know, self-managed super fund has quite strict rules in terms of what it can and cannot do from a property investment perspective. And development is definitely one that you can't do it. So even to build a house, the only way that you can build a house in self-managed super fund, for those that probably not aware of, is if you buy something under the same contract. So probably going back to the concept of a house and land package, but it needs to be under the same contract. And there are companies now that actually specialize in just packaging that all up. Will charge a premium for you, but you can actually do that. However, what was interesting in doing in self-managed super fund, there is another way, and this is probably, don't take that as a financial advice because you probably need to have a chat with your accountant. But I believe there is a way that you can invest in a development through self-managed super fund by setting up a separate structure that
okay, well, let's not go too deep into self-managed super fund.
There is a way, but it is not easy, and I probably wasted about 6 months trying to go that path. And let's simplify that. Let's just go and buy properties that will give me what I want from day zero without having to go to the hassle of building. And then as I started to look into it, I realized that my key goals out of self-managed super fund was properties that were located in areas that had all the elements for high growth. So from a population perspective, from an economic standpoint, job diversification, all the things that would trigger capital growth over time. But it also needed to give me at least 8% yield because, as you know, the lending self-managed super fund, because of the limited recourse borrowing arrangement, you would pay a premium on the bank. So typically, you're probably paying an extra 1% on the top of what it would cost you to invest outside of super. So I wanted to get 8% just to cover all the expenses and try to have if not positively geared, a neutral portfolio that was growing in value. That was my objective with self-managed super fund.
You've articulated that very well. Excellent.
Thank you.
Let's run this thing. Let's see what it's all about.
Joe's favorite area, Armadale, mate.
Yeah. So the first two, I pretty much bought them at the same time. It was probably only a couple of weeks apart. So I was working with the buyer's agent back at the time, and I started looking. As I said, my brief was high growth, high yield, and affordable. I forgot to mention affordable. So then I started being presented with a whole bunch of options, most of them between Southeast Queensland and WA. And I did favor those two areas because, as you can see on my investment portfolio outside of super, majority of my properties are in New South Wales. So I wanted to diversify in other states. And one of the key things outside of super, let's start spreading the wings and going elsewhere because I have stuff in New South Wales, so let's start to get outside of New South Wales. So found this 3-bedroom villa in Armadale, which is just probably on the back street from the train station. Bought it for 205. It needed a little bit of work. I probably did the bare minimum and just sort of fix up a couple of things that probably cost me about 10K in that first year just to replace a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't really running properly. But from the day one, like it was already giving me a good yield, but the rents, as you know, in WA just skyrocketed. And if you look at these days, a 3-bedroom place in Armadale, you're probably not gonna find something for less than $500 these days per week. So this lease expires.
I also think your valuation might be a little bit like $425 sounds pretty cheap.
No, I mean it's a villa though, Joe. So, and it's also, I mean, you could still buy a house in Armadale for 500, 520. So, and you're probably right. You could probably get like
cool. Sorry, I'm
using the real estate
domain thing.
Well, that's you're right. And like Joe, it's probably 480.
With a little, a pinch of salt, but
that's insane though. 35% growth per annum. Like it's doubled in 2 years or 2 and a bit years.
3 years. 3 years. Yeah.
Crazy.
Crazy. So that has probably been the best performing property in my whole portfolio. Like in 3 years, double value. But we know that Perth did nothing for the previous 15 years. Pretty much. So I just hope that the next 15 is not the same. But it has definitely done its thing in a very short period of time.
So the rental yield on there was 11%. That is ridiculous.
It's currently 11 at the purchase price. So, as I was saying, the rent could easily increase to 500 plus a week as the new lease sort of comes on in a few months. Then,
interesting.
Yeah. Any questions on Armadale?
I just want to know, like, what are your thoughts on that property? Because it has basically doubled. Like, how much it could still grow? I don't know, could grow another 20, 30% or whatever in the next sort of 12 to 18 months. But like, what are your thoughts on that type of property? Is it a keeper till retirement, or what do you want to do with it?
I'm not planning to sell, and I think one of the challenges of self-managed super fund that people may not know is that you can't redraw, or not so much redraw. You can actually refinance and take equity out of a property to then buy something else. So the only way that you can release equity is actually selling the asset. I still believe it has legs, so I'm not planning to sell that anytime soon. So I'm willing to wait and see what happens before anything else. So I do think that it is going to grow, because I think Perth still has some growth in it.
Yeah. Because we'll talk about it at the end. It's like, well, what are the next steps? Because you've continued to buy your SMSF. Do you have any questions, Armadale, Joe?
No. I think we should. I want to get to the end of this portfolio, so I'm just kind of factoring in the time. So why go so low value? So we've got a 200,000, 200,000, a 450, and then a 245,000. Why not buy one at 650?
I probably got convinced by the buyer's agent that I should spend more fees on probably more properties transactions than actually just buying one. No, just joke. Look, I wanted to diversify a little bit, and as you can see, like, but the third property there, Harristown, it is actually a duplex. So I spent a little bit more on that. So I was aiming. So I'm sort of looking at different options and trying to go different things. And I could have gone, but typically, if you want a higher yield, you're probably going to have to sort of stay on the more affordable, sort of play on the affordable.
That's what I was going to make a note of, right? Like to get yields like that, it is at the lower end of the market. But also that lower end doesn't exist anymore. 205, 220 doesn't really exist. So Townhouse
apparently it does though, Joe. One in June of 2024 for 245,000.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, free units you can still buy. You can buy that. So any key insights or value that you got from the Caboolture one? 5K discount, 2K handyman. I love how that you like.
I'll just a reminder for me to mention. So with Caboolture, I put 5K discount because there is one element, and I did the same thing in Aitkenvale. So when you buy, especially negotiating a property, you sign the contract. It's always dependent on pests and building inspection. And typically, you're going to get that building inspection, and it's going to be pointing out all the little things. And most of them are cosmetic, which, to be honest, I don't really mind about the wall is chipped and blah, 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 that type of stuff. But what I usually do is through the buyer's agent, I go, let's go back to the vendor and ask for a discount, because I'm going to have to spend, I don't know, X amount of dollars to fix all those things up. And typically speaking, I get it. Like there was 2 property transactions there where I got the discount because I asked for one. And I would just probably encourage people when actually negotiating the property, don't feel that you can't negotiate even after you sign the contract, because you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Except in WA.
Except in WA. But there is so much money that's left on the table. And the way it works is, like, I see a lot of people I see a lot of people having the challenge when they walk into a place, they point out every single problem to the agent. They're like, oh my gosh, look at this plumbing issue. Oh my gosh, these cracks in the wall. Oh my God. So it's really it's quite good. You have a little bit more leverage if you have someone else do an inspection for you and they have the video. So you get the person in and they here's the problem. You get them to record it, but you just kind of, don't make a big noise about it. Don't make a big song and dance about it, because then you can say, well, I wasn't aware of this problem. Obviously, in your head, you've already factored in the price based on the leaky thing here and the plumbing thing there. But the big hole in the ceiling, it's like, well, that was a little bit obvious. Okay, yeah. But I wasn't aware of these 6 other things. And then that allows you to discount the price thousands and thousands of dollars. So yeah, don't go in there tearing the place to shreds. Go in there quietly, see everything, and then come back and say, well, this is what I saw. You didn't point it out to me. I need a discount.
I tend to agree, Joe, because you remove your leverage, because then you're like, well, the agents are going to say, well, you know all the things. You pointed them out. That's you factored into your price. Yeah. But yeah,
very true.
Good
it's
shout.
the same every time. So like we do pest and buildings all the time, and there is always a high moisture reading behind the wall, right? Properties that were built in the 70s, 80s, 90s use grout. Grout is fibrous. It allows water to come in. It costs about $1,800 to regrout a bathroom. So it's not a major issue, but they've had 30 years of use of that dwelling and that bathroom, and I'm getting the raw end of the deal here. You need to give me $1,800 so I can get the grout redone. And people are like, well, yeah. I mean, some people tell you to get stuff because you bought it at a great price. But anyway, I'm sorry. Now I'm like, hey, let's hurry this thing along. And here I am rambling about bloody pest and buildings. So not trying to hurry it along, but just trying to get all the good out of it. So Harristown, you went down with that duplex, one title, 8K paint and carpet and a vanity. And then, okay, so talk to me about this individual water meter. What's that look like?
So because it's one title, there was just 1 meter actually feeding both units, and you can't actually charge the water usage to the tenants if there is no individual meter. So I spent a little bit of money just to be able to do that. It will probably take me a couple of years to get the money back from that investment, but I think after that it pays for itself, I guess. So I had to actually replace the carpet, the vanity, and one of the units because it was quite run down. But in the scheme of things, it was like an $8,000 investment, and you can see that one of them rents for slightly higher than the other, and that's on the back of that slightly improvement. So I can actually get a little bit more money out of the unit that I changed the carpets and the flooring and the vanity and painted.
And with those rents, would they have been, so they're 340 and 365 now? Are they sort of around that mid twos, like 250 and 230 early in the piece, or have they gone up about sort of 30,
so that's a great question, because when I bought it, I think both units were rented for 220 or something along those lines. But I could see back then that this one was off market. Was somebody was selling, the buyer's agent actually got off market before he hit the general public. I could see that the rents were under market value, and I all I had to do is just wait until the contracts end, and I'll probably be able to renew and bring them up to market rate. So, but not only that, the Toowoomba went through a little bit of boom, like pretty much everywhere in Southeast Queensland. So the rents that when I bought it was 220, and maybe the market rate was 280. It has increased even further, and just sort of keeping up with the marketplace.
Just at that affordable, because when people are trying to pay that sort of 500, 550, 600 a week, it starts to just get really unaffordable in the kind of cost of living. That sort of everything's gone up. So you sort of start to say those bottom end rentals might sort of just start to see a bit of a resurgence.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, so with Harristown, it is probably another thing is that the block of land that it sits is, I think, 700 square meters, but it's actually zoned for a higher density. So not that I can develop that under self-managed super fund, but I think just having a higher zoning always help with the value of the property, because somebody could come in later on down and actually develop that to a higher and better use. And a developer will always value that potential land a little bit higher. So I think from a resale perspective, it has another thing to its benefit.
Unreal. Okay. And then one of the questions that's popped up here is, did you go with these townhouses and units because of land tax for Queensland? Like, is this a land consideration, or was this more of the cheaper end of town that you were wanting to spend to get that higher yield?
Yeah, it was probably more the higher yield component. And if I was to buy a house, I probably wouldn't be as diversified in sort of different areas and trying to sort of
Mm.
dip my toes in different markets. Maybe I could have bought a house in one location and maybe another unit, and that would be it. So I wanted to try different things in there.
Yeah, I like it. This is another one, and I think Brian's also answered it for us, but he said they bought, Dan. So he bought new outside of super and existing SMSF. Would it not have been better the other way around to allow for aspects such as renos? But it's hard to do renos in an SMSF, isn't it? Because then you have to tip cash into it. So
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if you want to.
Correct. Yeah. So with super, you can borrow money to improve a property. So any renovations or any improvements that you make, it has to be out of the funds in your super. So if you look at the 10,000 fix or the individual meter, anything that I had to buy or improve on all those properties, they had to come out of the cash account from the self-managed super fund. So
yeah. And
that's,
that's something that somebody else has asked as well. Like, what was I mean, if you're okay sharing, but what was the starting sort of balance of the SMSF? Were you talking a couple $100,000? Are we talking $500,000 plus?
it was definitely between my wife and I. It was between 200 250, somewhere around there.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's a good little amount, though.
Incredible.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's
was.
not nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they usually say that I look up. I never really looked and actually did the calculation, but I heard so many people saying that until you probably have a combined amount of maybe a couple 100,000, the amount of fees and the audits and the stuff, the compliance that you have to do is super. It's not really worthwhile. I don't know if that's true or not, but it happened that the time that I was looking into
Do you want to bring that up?
Sorry,
the,
it's not relevant. Not relevant to SMSF.
So the time that I wanted to start investing in super, it happened that I had a balance that was actually worthwhile doing. So
Usable.
Yeah.
I got to get on. I got to get on the SMSF train as well. I'm starting to sort of, I got enough. But anyway, that's for another conversation. So the last property, should we pivot to Aitkenvale? Like what was it was a little bit of a break there. Was that because, did you have the 2-year
big old break?
Yeah. Was that because of the rooming in Darra?
Because I had some other money. So I had, besides property, I also had some investments in some ETFs and stocks and so on. It just didn't work out for me. I'm sorry, stocks and ETFs, but my thing is property.
All right, we've got some people coming in the next couple of weeks who might be a little bit more pro shares. So Joe, shove yourself in and get comfortable. But no, it's your bread and butter. Like you go.
Yeah, go on.
Now you as we alluded to, you sort of stay in your lane, whereas I probably look at 14 different things in 2 days, and then I'm like, you know what, just focus on that first thing that I had. I think you have a lot more kind of discipline to focus. That kind of which is why one of the reasons you've gotten so far. You just put the blinkers on and make sure you focus and get it done.
Yeah, it's the right way to. It's 100% the right way to see it. I see so many people looking at property development, looking at subdivision, looking at commercial property, looking at rooming houses, getting educated, going to the courses. Now, do get educated and go to the courses, but it's so easy to stay on that kind of education train, and it's really enjoyable because property is so fun and getting educated is awesome, and learning and growing, expanding, but nothing is more valuable than taking action, because even in those properties that may have been less than desirable, the action that you took 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, they might not have been the absolute peak of the best of the best. It was what you knew at the time was the best, and you took action on it. And it's been very, very forgiving. And in fact, Ben made you more money than you've made, you'd be able to make in triple this amount of time in a normal everyday job. So it's the action that I'm taking out of this, that you have not slowed down. Like, you've just kept going. Well, has there been periods of, talk to me about that actually, because have there been times when you're like, screw this?
I find like if you average it out, like I probably have had one transaction per year since I started investing, give or take.
Okay.
So the period that I haven't purchased anything was probably, I was always itching to continue to invest. but because of whatever reason, mostly serviceability, you can't do it, and then you just have to work it out what it is that you need to do to be able to continue your journey in a few months' time. And then some, like I don't know how many times I have conversations with my broker, and poor Barry.
He's probably named his second child after you, hasn't he, Barry? Like, it sounds like you put him through put his second child for a university if he's got one.
So every now and then, like, no, I can't refinance this. Now you can't do that. Okay. And then I end up having a chat with him like a couple of months later, and then say, I think we can do this with this lender because they have changed the policy on whatever. And then, yeah, okay, let's continue then. So sometimes
that's the perfect broker.
Yeah.
Somebody's proactive. Like, you really want somebody who sort of is on top of, because you see some brokers, are 5 or 10 of them, and that's who they stick to. They stick to who they know. And if you can't get in those lenders, they'll just say, sorry, I can't help you. Whereas it sounds like Barry, he goes across, like, he's really, like, Granite is your sort of very specialist kind of lender. They're an SMSF from my understanding. So he's kind of he's really on top of his game, being able to do that, because it is tough. There's literally hundreds of lenders out there these days.
But I challenge him too, so there is a bit of give and take. And saying that, and I actually encourage, like, with your team of professionals, not only your broker, your accountant, whoever it is, there has been a number of times that I have spoken with other brokers, or even Barry has told me, like, why don't you have a chat with someone else that maybe has a little bit more experience on rooming house or something. But what I always find is that usually what he's telling me is kind of what to expect. But there has been a number of times that I'll go have a look at what else is out there. How many times I ask a question in the group about finance and stuff. So you can probably go back and have a look at different questions, but there is also always a question about I get stuck. Is anybody in that situation or has gone through that situation to share some insights?
Has it helped? Like, have you gotten that answers that you
put him on spot?
No, I'm just trying to think on this specific case on lending, for example, for rooming house. I probably got my answers out of having a chat with the people that I was dealing with to actually construct. So they actually pinpointed to some lenders in specific and gave me some directions. But I use the group, and I use for other things. For example, I need a PM in property manager in Aitkenvale. Any suggestions? I have this person. Like, there is always somebody that has a property in that location that will give you some indication of who to use. So you can use the group for different things, and sometimes you get the answer that you need, sometimes you don't, and you just have to find elsewhere.
Nice. There's a whole heap of questions in here, so I want to get to these. What about the admin of running this portfolio? Surely there is constant issues, constant paperwork. Like, how is that? Can you just, because I have, like, there's how is it with one this big?
I just did my self-managed super fund tax return, and as you can see, it's all the paperwork in there. But
not as big as I expected, actually.
I learned that's just the ATO and the accountant paperwork, because I already archived all that stuff. But I have a filing cabinet, and I have like a folder for each property, and I learned what works for me is being organized, and I probably learned that the hard way in my first few sort of attempts. So what I do is every single bill, every single thing that I pay to each property, I print it out and I archive. At the end of the financial year, I just sort of collect all the pieces of information for each property, and then send everything to the accountant and sort of take it from there. But
okay. So you physically print it all out, and then at the end of the year, you scan it all back in.
Because then I reconcile the paperwork with the digital stuff and see what's missing, and then compare with the year before, and there is always something that we missed. And
wow, man, that's you're really focused and disciplined and structured and organized. Like, that's impressive. You can do that.
Yeah.
There's no way.
That is the admin definitely increases, and I'm considering outsource a lot of the. For example, I still pay the water and the council bills, and I'm thinking maybe I should just get the PM to actually pay all that stuff. I don't know.
I could, I used to, the one thing I sort of heard the only thing you should pay yourself, they say, is insurance, because then you want to make sure that's current. But for me, I like to pay everything too. I'm a bit micromanagey as too.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a personal thing, but I don't know. Maybe I'm actually revisiting all those things, because maybe there is an element that I don't need to do everything myself.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, someone's written up here, Daniel's self-discipline is impressive. No doubt a big contributor to your success, definitely.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's crack on.
Jenny certainly. Question.
Yeah, let's crack on to the rest of this portfolio. What's next? I think I want to know what's next, because you've built a sustainable portfolio. It's worth close to $10 million. You could sell this all right now and retire on a beach, right? I think you could easily. I mean, the self-managed super fund, you got to wait. But you could sell it all, PPOR free, quit your job, you'll be fine. So, one, why aren't you doing that? And two, what's next?
Yeah,
I think I'll get bored.
Look, probably before getting to the what's next, probably just highlighting what are my goals, because that will probably help to understand the path for the next step. So, I think from a goal perspective, I would like, and in terms of time frame, like within 5-7 years, to be in a position where I have a portfolio that could generate $300,000 in terms of cash flow. And whilst the portfolio probably it's almost giving me that now, I have to pay a lot of sort of interest to service all the mortgages. And so the net position, of course, is negative at the moment. But if I think simplistically, to aim for 300, and I was having this chat on the Facebook group on one of the comments during the week that Jeff posted. Reality is, if you're getting 300 cash flow, you're probably netting about 200 after all the taxes and stuff in there, give or take. And I would see that's enough, provided I have our PPOR sort of paid off. The way that we sort of expenses are, I would think that will be sufficient. But for us to get in that position and think from an equity perspective, if you have, let's say, $6 million invested at 5%, you would get that $300,000 a year. So a different way of looking at the portfolio, instead of looking at how many properties do I need, that type of stuff, because you can easily get lost on quantity, because it will depend on the value of the property and then how much it returns. So the way that I look at it from a goal perspective is, if I can build a portfolio that gives me a net equity position of that around $6 million, then I have the options on how to actually structure the portfolio to give me my cash flow position. I could sell some, I could sort of there's a number of things that I could do. So my goal has probably been more towards building the equity position to get there than actually focusing on the number of properties that I need.
Yeah, and then you got to a position where you can't grow anymore, so you have to turn to the cash flow kind of tap to allow you to open up your serviceability. Like we kind of talk about it in like 3 phases, right? It's like accumulation, and then you hit a borrowing and serviceability wall, and then you turn it on your portfolio and do that kind of more cash flow focus, and then the end game transition.
Yeah.
Just a small note, someone's just jumped in here. Is that 300K before or after expenses of the portfolio?
That's the 300.
Lost Joe as well. I'm back.
Yeah, he's frozen.
Sorry.
Was that?
No, I think Jeff is frozen.
I think Jeff is frozen.
Yeah.
But yeah, 300 after all expenses of the property, and
before. So by before, I mean, assuming I have 300 without having to pay probably any sort of interest on it, because then you're always going to have property management, you're always going to have maintenance, that type of stuff. So so if I can net 300, and then sort of once you take the taxes and stuff, you probably end up having 200 sort of clean. So that would be the ideal position.
And how would you then sort of think about sort of? I mean, we probably shouldn't give advice, but we're not going to. But the structure of that, because is that sort of then? I suppose you find ways to make sure can distribute to different people to reduce your tax you're paying. Not that we're saying people should or
So
shouldn't do that.
I think trust can be quite handy from that perspective, and the way that I have structured, for example, the rooming house, it is under that trust because I was expecting it to be cash flow positive, so I preempted that move in terms of if it's generating cash flow, it makes sense to be under trust because then you can distribute income accordingly. So there is an element of sort of planning the structure that you're purchasing. My earlier purchase or probably in personal name, so there is always a balance of the now and tomorrow, so it's just finding the right balance, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. You just focus on what's in front of you. You don't sort of get too bogged down in what's going to be in the future. This is an issue one. For those that are first in their family investment property, like many migrants, what advice would you give to them as they start building wealth from scratch? This is a great question.
Yeah, so I had some notes here on steps. So
you might have to share your screen again.
I can share. Let me just give one second.
Oh, okay. Sorry if you got something to share, but if not, don't worry. Just talk to it.
I'll look up. Present. Share screen.
Do some music. Oh, that was
all right. So I think sort of key advices, I should say instead of advice. So I think, as we were saying earlier, I think building a team is probably one of the key things. As I said, broker is the top one there, but you need to make sure you have a good accountant. Solicitor, you probably end up dealing with a fair number of solicitors and conveyancers, not so much lawyers, should I say conveyancer, because for each state, you probably need to have different license. So if you're buying different states, you may end up dealing with different conveyancers, and solicitors. So just making sure that you get a good one. Property manager as well. So I have good and bad property managers, but once you have good property managers, you know how to benchmark them against each other. So once you have a good one, you know what to expect from a good one versus a not so good. So if it doesn't work, just move on to the next one, I guess. From a self-managed perspective, I did use a financial planner to help me to set it up. I no longer do because there is sort of costs associated with that. But I think at the beginning, it can help, especially because there are a lot of rules in self-managed funds. So at least you need to know what you need to know to make sure that you don't make a mistake and are paying thousands in fines to ATO.
Fines.
Fines are not fun. They're not fine at all.
Well, yeah, it's like tax. Is it a fine or is it tax? What is it?
Yeah,
both.
I think that education component is definitely a must. You're never gonna know everything that needs to know about the property, and I've been sort of studying for over a decade now, and I can say I probably only scratch the surface because there is so much stuff that I don't know, and I still try to get my head around. So there is so many books and content that you can watch and read out there. You can pay for research. There's some amazing sort of research out there that you can consume. I went to so many seminars, and I think these days there is probably not as many as it used to have on the weekends. But I think there was a great way of not only to get access to content, but also to actually chat with people that are also interested in property and get to understand and know what people are doing and give you ideas what you could be looking at next steps, that type of stuff. And make sure that you have an action plan, set up your goals, make sure you take action because you can easily just get consumed by analysis paralysis. So just have a plan, try to execute it. It's
I like plan B. I like having a plan B. So what does that mean? Like, and how do you think about that? Because that's a bit of an interesting one.
Yeah, because like how many times I got stuck because of accessibility. So in that scenario, so for example, today if I'm purchasing my next property, I'm not only thinking about my next property, I'm actually about thinking what I would probably be doing the next one. If I don't want to get stuck with serviceability again, I need to make sure that my next property improves my serviceability in a way that my subsequent property won't be impacted by the assessment on this one. So it's just having to think about one step ahead and try to balance that. So and by plan B also is make sure that you have a buffer in there, because I'll say that majority of the community here has been impacted by the interest rate rises in the last 2-3 years from where it was where we are now. I always have a decent buffer in there, and I try to aim to have probably at least sort of 6 months worth of expenses in cash sitting on my offset account, because you don't know what's going to happen. Like I don't have my own business, and you see a lot of the people that build their portfolio, they tend to have their own business, but I have a job, and if I by any chance I lose that job, I want to make sure that I have enough buffer in there to allow me some time to get another job and that type of stuff. So
rather than being a forced seller. Man, this has been an unreal session. I appreciate you taking so much time going well over above. I do see a couple of little things. Your little tagline there. You got a shirt that says it. Greedy landlord.
Yeah.
Can I get one of those?
Yeah, I can get you one from AliExpress, definitely.
I'll pay.
So look, I think that landlords and we tend to get a bit of a bad reputation about, in a way, by the media and probably by the sort of politicians in general. There are a number of times that sorry, my screen just froze.
That's all right. I'm sharing free anyway.
Yeah, no. So what I was gonna say is that we tend to get a bad reputation, especially by the media, and try to portray real estate investors as greedy landlords, and we're there to ruin the world in that sense. But my lens on it is that as an investor, and like I'm trying to do what's best for myself and my family. And I could choose to invest in other things. I just happen to like property. But if I was investing in stocks or in the share market and so on, I don't see the other asset classes probably being targeted in the same way. So I think we tend to get a bigger share of the negativity because people need to live in houses and so on. And the cost of living tends to impact people from a rental perspective. So, but my lens on it is that we usually take the blame, but if you look at holistically, why that happens, and why there is such a bad rap. And my view is that the whole housing crisis and rental crisis in that sense, it goes back probably about 40 years. When we started, Australia sort of stopped and reduced investment in social housing. My view is that that has triggered years of the whole expectancy of new dwellings to be provided by to rental accommodation from the investors themselves. So you can expect a social aspect coming out of private investment, because that's never going to happen. So my view is that we tend to get a bad rap, and the whole greedy landlord, of course, is a bit of a sort of there's a bit of satire around it. But I would like, one of my goals is that I would like to work with property at some stage in my career, and that could happen in the next few years if I get to a position where I sort of have enough cash flow to actually make that move. But I have been toying around with AI and a lot of APIs and getting a lot of work done on that way from my work perspective. And it gave me an idea of building potentially a tool to help and assist property investors. And I was just gonna put up on the screen here, if people want
It's called
to actually
greedylandlord.net.
greedylandlord.net. Yeah. So if people want to reach out, go reach out to greedylandlord.net. I don't have anything to sell or anything to actually get you over there. At this stage, I'm just doing a bit of research. I'd like people probably to take 2-3 minutes of their time just to answer a couple of questions that I have in that page. That will help me to probably fine-tune what I'm willing to build, which is an AI tool that can help property investors with data-driven insights on property and suburbs that can help them to analyze deals on the go with backing to a lot of different data sources. So I've just been playing around with that idea, but I would like to validate that idea with other like-minded people and make sure that that idea sort of has some legs before I dive into it further. If I would appreciate if people could take a couple of minutes at a time to go there and give us some feedback.
Yeah,
if they can give greedy landlords, you need like a little meme, like I reckon you could have whatchamacallit,
I'll set up a union of greedy landlords.
Oh jeez,
Jesus,
this is getting controversial. But
Daniel,
no,
this has been really an epic session, mate. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. No one does this, right? We've never had someone open up their portfolio, show the income, the outgoing, the LVR, the total expenses, the total cash flow, where they were purchased, what they were purchased for, how long it's gone, shared so much of their challenges. So thank you very much for doing it. I love this, completing it now. Love it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything but gratitude to give, mate. So thank you very much for that.
No, I really appreciate it. And look, I love property, and a lot of the times, like even in the office, like like if people start talking real estate, you just stop everything. Like let's have a chat. But reality is, I just like to look at it in the sense that I wish I knew all I know now 10 years ago, but if I had somebody that I could go to and ask all those questions, that would have been awesome. So from a sharing perspective, I think we need to celebrate sort of achievements, and I see so many people with great portfolios, and as I said, I consume so much content from different sort of medias around real estate investing, and there's so many people that have built amazing stuff, and I take so much value out of it. So if I can do the same, to me is probably just a way of giving back a bit of knowledge, I guess.
Yeah, and it's the way we kind of all learn. We learn mostly by seeing what others have done and hopefully learning from their mistakes rather than having to make those mistakes ourselves. Like that one, the units up in sort of, not to sort of keep flogging a dead horse, but yeah, you went through that and you're able to sort of keep moving forward. I think that's kind of my big takeaway from this. Like you sort of whatever obstacle came in your way, you just found a way to sort of work through the problem. Yeah, appreciate all the good comments, and thanks for. If you have a story, reach out and we'll have that conversation. I can't guarantee we'll get you on. Look, as long as you're sort of, we love genuine investors like Dan coming on. He hasn't actually got a product; he's got something he's working on, a bit of a wireframe. But no, that's thanks for just answering the call. Like I put the bat call out, and Batman answered. You've been called Batman before,
the $10 million man almost.
Yeah. It's really appreciate the invite, and happy to chat whenever you guys want.
Have a beer or something. Man.
We'll catch up. Yeah, we'll catch up soon. Let's go buy a property. See you guys later.
Thanks
everyone.
Bye.
See you next one.
Bye.